Okay, good afternoon, members of the public and people that work for the county, and also for the members of the Jail Oversight Board. This is the meeting of the September meeting for the Jail Oversight Board. Our chair, Councilman Kevin Madden, is on the meeting by telephone. We have a quorum, so we're going to begin our meeting. As normal meetings go, we always allow public comment on agenda items at the beginning of the meeting. So if a member of the public has a comment on something on the agenda, they're welcome to speak now. There will also be a public comment period at the end of the meeting for any topic of relevance to this board. I'll ask now if there's anyone from the public that would like to speak on an agenda item now. Seeing none right now, we'll proceed with the rest of the meeting. Our first matter of business is the approval of the minutes from August 2021.
I make a motion for approval of the August 2021 minutes.
Thank you. Can we have a second?
Second.
We have that seconded. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's
Aye.
passed. I'm getting all sorts of phone calls. Okay, the next is the approval of the reports from August 2021. Can I have a motion to approve the reports?
I make a motion for approval of reports of 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Love. Second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Corson. Is there any discussion of the reports from August 2021? Hearing none, can we have a vote to approve the reports? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
No. So the reports from August are approved. The next matter on the agenda is the approving of staffing penalties. And on this topic, we welcome Warden Tatum to tell us the status.
Good evening. How's everyone? The penalties for August 2021 total $241,028.56. The staffing rate is 82%, and the effective staffing rate is at 76%.
And Warden, what is the, what's that difference from the previous month?
I want to say last month we were,
I mean, is it increased or?
oh, it's significantly increased.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, but in terms of actual dollars, I think we were just under 200,000.
And is there any, I know we talked about last time, is the different departments that, handle that, was there any significant increase in a specific department?
As I look at the report here, correctional supervision went from 115,000 the previous month to 161,000 this month. That pretty much by itself
Covers.
drove the increase.
Okay.
This is a record increase, I believe.
Yes, this is, yes.
Is there a motion to approve the staffing penalty? Thank you, Judge Wellen.
Second.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? I'll only say that I think this is a record of penalty.
It's the most I've seen since I've been in the job.
Any other discussion? Not hearing any. Those in favor of accepting the staffing penalty, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
No opposed, so the staffing penalty is accepted.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just because there's been such a protracted discussion of changing how the jail will be managed, do we interview, or does GEO interview employees that resign? And I'm curious about all this negativity, how it may be impacting people's intention to go work at another correctional facility.
So exit interviews,
Yes.
right. I'm not privy to those. I can say my own observations support what you're leading toward, and that is, given the current environment and the uncertainty that surrounds whether there'll be a transition or not, does have an impact on people's psyche, morale. I've given, there have been a number of people asking me for letters of reference, things of that nature, for other job prospects, because they're concerned. They don't know whether they'll be retained or not. And I try to assure them, but,
I understand. I just think it's not been discussed, and I think it just has to be made out in the open, because I think that's
well, it certainly has an
unsettling
impact.
to employees.
Right.
Any further questions on the staffing penalty?
I guess I just wondering what, what incentives, because I know, just looking around, I know so many businesses are, putting forth different incentives, different things like that. So what incentives are being put out there to
So-
try to obtain and retain?
As you may recall, I talked about the recruitment bonus that they were offering staff at the last meeting, I believe it was. I have a synopsis of some of the efforts made over the last 30 days. There were 107 interviews scheduled. 32 actually were conducted, 75 no-shows. 7 failed background check. GEO will be attending a multi-employer job fair at King of Prussia on September 23rd. And of course, during this period, there were 11 individuals that took advantage of the referral process and are in that first stage, whereas, the referral, if the employee stays 90 days, they get that first $1,000. And then subsequent to that, 6 months, I think, is the next point, $2,000. And in a year, that third level, they'll get $3,000. So, well, it'll be a total of 3 altogether, $1,000 at each level.
Okay.
All right. There were 20 individuals hired in the last 30 days, and 16 are currently in process.
I'm going to take a note from council, trustee council. I'm following the agenda verbatim, and we failed to do the Pledge of Allegiance because it's not written, so I didn't follow it, but I'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance now if we could.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, Warden, next on the agenda is an update on the coronavirus situation. If you could give us an update.
All right. COVID infections for August. We had 134 inmates tested, 0 new infections. We had 2 staff members who reported being tested, one of which was infected, but that infection occurred at the time of their orientation training, and so that person never made it into the institution. We had a total of 54 new vaccinations administered to the resident population. We saw 598 new commitments, and 163 of those had previously been vaccinated before they got to us. The vaccination rate right now is pretty good. We're at 39.8% for August. All right, so just about ready to crack 40%. I did have some
Warden?
bad news for this month, though, just before I got here, actually. We had 1 new infection among the resident population who's been sequestered to the upper medical department. So that's where we keep people who we suspect may be infected or who are infected.
Warden, could I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
You can hear me? You said 100 and how many tests and 0 positives?
134, 0 positives in August.
That is a very, very surprising. Oh, this is in August. Okay. Well, that's still surprising because just the overall positivity rate in the county in August was, I think in August was probably in the 3 to 4% range. What is the current criteria for testing?
If anyone appears to be symptomatic, they're tested. If someone, asks to come see medical and they have certain symptoms, they'll be tested. The testing right now is pretty random based on transfer. So we had 134 people that were ready for transfer. Therefore, they had to be tested at least 3 days before the movement. So that's how our testing is going right now. That's why we get the numbers we do. But other than that,
Do you know if GEO is
have to be
testing on intake?
symptomatic or show cause. In
Do you know if
fact,
GEO is testing upon intake?
No, we don't do testing unless it's indicated in intake. We sequester the individuals for the first 14 days from everyone else.
And that,
Okay.
that.
Well,
putting it-
that might be why the 0 positives. I guess if we're not really testing community and instead it's people who have been, not to say that this isn't still good news. I mean, it's definitely a good sign, but it sounds like we're testing people who have been within the prison for over 14 days and therefore haven't been exposed to the outside.
Well, as I
that
said,
right?
there was one new infection among the resident population that I found out about today. That person was tested as a result of a transfer, was going to be transferred, but he was asymptomatic. So he wouldn't have been tested otherwise, so maybe you're right.
So the process now is that as people are coming in, they're basically in a quarantine with other
Yes,
people
the
coming
same
in.
process that we've been doing since we implemented,
Right.
these protocols for the pandemic.
I mean, it does seem that with testing more available now, maybe it would be a good idea to test on the way in. If you get transfers from other are you getting any transfers from other facilities where they're tested before they come to you?
We don't typically get transfers
Right.
unless we're doing, someone is coming down on writ from upstate,
Okay.
things of that nature. But again, the protocol for them is the same. Before you move, you have to be tested within 3 days of the move.
Right.
The process is the same now as it was, say, a year ago, correct?
Yes,
When we
yes.
had higher
We
numbers.
had, we had significant infections at one point, and then,
Correct.
we put certain things in place. They decreased.
Right.
They remained, for the most part in place. Now, Kevin, I said before that I suspect that this will be a lagging indicator, and I suspect that there will be more infections as a result of what's going on in the community. So this is good news now, but it doesn't preclude what may happen in the future. So hopefully it doesn't, but we'll see. And we'll take the appropriate steps to mitigate it should it occur.
Yeah, there's a really good number, so I mean, there's no real compelling reason to change what's being done. I would say that if it turns out that people could be tested and then put into the population easier, I mean, you'd think that would be considered, but at this point, there doesn't seem to be any compelling reason to ask GEO to do anything different. And hopefully the numbers stay down and
Hopefully.
keep it that way.
Yes.
I had a question. For the 14 days that they're quarantined, are there an intake, or say 50, 60 people come in, according to the process, they have to stay on intake or wherever you guys have them
Yes.
to be quarantined before they go on population?
Right.
You don't never
Not
get
in
bottlenecked?
intake. They would be processed out of intake onto the cohort unit.
Okay, so that's before the 14 days though, right? They can still move somewhere where they can have space. That's
Well,
what I was
they
just
stay
thinking.
there until they go to their unit.
Right, okay. All right, thank you.
I just have one last question on, do we have a sense of the percentage of GEO corrections officers that are vaccinated? Do we know? We don't know
I
that.
don't know that number. I would like to know that number,
Yeah.
but it's,
But we don't know.
we've had some barriers in asking the
Right.
question.
Okay. Any further questions for the warden? Thank you on that. I guess the next item on the agenda is an update on contraband issues that you've been dealing with.
Right, so last month, we had 8,720 cell searches. We had 192 canine searches, 6 shakedowns. Contraband remained the same as the previous month, where we found 12 cases of significant contraband, or hard contraband, we would call it. We had no vehicle search last month, and we did have our monthly meeting with CID, prosecutors, and the Drug Task Force, and that proved fruitful. In fact, as a result of our collaborative effort in intel gathering, we were able to put together probable cause for a couple of arrests that occurred last month. And so that's now 3 arrests based on our efforts in partnering with our community partners and law enforcement. So we're pleased with that. We're not done. We're going to continue along this path, and hopefully it'll bear fruit for us.
Warden, did you get any feedback from COs or anything on, the interest of the county and, I'll say, GEO working together and, CID? Is it kind of permeating through the facility of the interest in contraband? I mean, it probably was always there, but it seems that it's been, this board, I know, Mr. Court, we've been trying to keep that top of mind.
Yeah. So there's been a point of emphasis made on contraband. We've communicated this throughout the facility. There are some enthusiastic people who like the change. Of course, they feel safer as a result of finding, hard contraband. For the most part, it would be positive. For those people who don't see it so well, I mean, they're looking over their shoulders, I think. So I can't help that. But if you want to go down that alley, the accountability measures will be meted out.
Thank you. It just seems to me that if you have ideas, and of course I'm sure you would exchange them with us and let us know where we can support you and the facility and the other corrections officers on that, which when you said it makes people feel safer, that's a really valuable outcome to have for that. So thank you for the work on that. I don't know if anyone else has questions or.
And Warden, what was the reason for not doing the car searches for that month?
We just didn't get to it that month. Other things occurred.
So what is, and I'm just curious because I just know when the contraband letter came out and we kind of were going over the points, that was one that was really emphasized. That was one of the things that we wanted
to implement regularly, and of the last 3 months we did 2. We just didn't do one last month. It takes a bit of coordination and takes some cooperation with the weather, and things of that nature. So it didn't happen last month, but they did make up for it in other areas with the searches. So.
All right.
Okay. Any questions or thoughts? Kevin, you're okay? Hopefully he's still there.
I am, yep.
Yep, okay. All right, with that, we'll move to item 7 on the agenda, which is a deprivatization update from our consultant from Alta Management, Mr. Majid Al-Sayed.
Good afternoon, members of the board, members of the public. This past month, Alta Management working with CGL, updated the cost estimate for county operations of the George Hill facility. And CGL performed a staffing analysis that was based on visiting the prison, based on evaluating the posts as they're currently staffed, looked at what it would take to staff a prison that is at full population of 1883. It updated the estimate that was done back in March, taking into account the bids that have been received on healthcare, maintenance, mail screening, food service, and other subcontracts. It identified all of the staffing needed to manage the jail, and it added 5% contingency on top of that. It added 6% across the board salary increase, including the cost of county benefits. And the total of that cost evaluation is $47.4 million. And that is compared to a GEO cost at full capacity of $52.9 million, reflecting an annual savings of $5.5 million for a county-run prison at full population. Some of the things we've reported in prior months, looking at GEO Group financials and at the cost of a corporation that's listed on Wall Street with highly paid executives. We looked at 4 years of finances for the GEO Corporation and calculated for the county what the taxpayer is paying for with the current private corporation. 2019, from the SEC filings, executive compensation was $13.6 million for 5 people. Board compensation was $1.7 million for the year. Political contributions were $2.8 million. Lobbying expenses were $4.3 million. Income taxes were $16.7 million. And earnings, profits were $168 million for the year, reflecting a total of $206 million of overhead that the GEO Corp had in 2019. Taking into account all of the beds that GEO Corporation manages throughout the country, roughly 93,000 beds, that works out to roughly $2,200 per bed of overhead that goes for executive compensation and other related expenses. If you take that times the 1,883 beds that GEO charges the county for on an annual basis, that's over $4 million of extra overhead costs that reflect what the Delaware County taxpayer is paying to have GEO here in the county. So we wanted to make an apples-to-apples comparison, bottom up, looking at staffing. That came out to a $5.5 million savings for the county to run the facility. A top-down estimate of overhead for GEO comes out to $4 million and change of extra overhead. So we just want to clarify that those are some of the data that we want to share with the board and with the public that will help the board when it comes to a time to make a vote on whether to deprivatize. Needs to take into account those calculations. All jails are experiencing challenges with hiring and keeping correctional officers, but GEO's correctional officers are paid 30% less than Chester County, Montgomery County, Bucks County, and other regional jails. So the extreme hardship they are seeing in keeping staff and hiring staff has to be correlated with the low wages that they pay their correctional officers. If the county is going to take over the jail, it will certainly have to pay higher wages. We'll have to provide county benefits, and we think that it would be much more able to hire and keep good people if it pays them a reasonable salary. That kind of summarizes all the work that we've done for the past 9 months. We think that at this point, the county, if the members of the board have more questions for us, we're happy to answer them. But basically, we think that it comes down to 2 questions. Should the county have a for-profit corporation managing its prison, whose mission is to maximize shareholder profit? That's the mission of the company. And it's been suffering some financial hardship in the last couple of years. It's under a lot of pressure to squeeze costs, to save pennies that they can pass on to their shareholders. Or should the county step up and manage the prison itself and make it an integrated part of its justice agencies and work across agencies in a much more coordinated manner rather than a siloed manner as it is today. And take the savings from that it will accrue from terminating the GEO contract and invest those savings in staff, in technology, in drug treatment, mental health, and reentry programs, rather than going to profits for the public corporation. And that is a summary of my report today.
So I just have a question. The RFPs that were put onto the county website and solicited, they bear out really the initial CGL feasibility study in terms of cost, if we're just talking cost.
And CGL was very thorough in the study that they did. They, for example, on the medical contract, they not only obtained the cost of contracts per person in the regional counties, they looked at other states, and they came up with averages. The proposals that came in, one was $1.5 million lower than the CGL estimate, and a couple were somewhat higher. And the other estimates were all within 5 or 10%. The other actual proposals were all within 5 or 10% of the CGL estimate. And to the county's credit, it hired CGL, which is one of the leading consulting firms in the country for correctional facilities.
Are those requests for proposals part of the
Wow. Oh, that's interesting. The first fire drill I've ever had.
probably the
Elevator?
the firewall.
Your Honor, you were starting to ask.
Now, so I guess with those requests for proposals, they just referred to, I think, the part of the county website, were they distributed to the members? Because I don't remember seeing them, and they're part of the website, I certainly can access them.
Yeah, they're on the website. They were published on the website for anyone to apply.
Okay, and has GEO, I know you've indicated the amount of savings, and in many meetings you've indicated that the county would be saving millions of dollars, basically, I think $5 million or so. Has GEO had an opportunity to respond or rebut or say that we haven't considered this, or we're underestimating this issue? I know they did originally early on, but in the most recent figures and the most recent requests for proposals, have they had an opportunity to respond, taking into consideration this is a public meeting, and obviously they could be listening to this as well as any
Certainly.
Member of the public? And have they had a chance, and number one, have they responded? Because I haven't seen anything come in regard to them responding to this, indicating, yes, that's accurate, or this is not accurate, and looking at both sides.
Your Honor, so in a couple of instances, when the original estimate was done back in March, they disagreed with some of the assumptions. But if you recall, that was about I think a 20-page report with detailed, down to the penny almost, calculations of costs for everything from insurance to programs to a very detailed estimate. And I don't think that GEO has brought forth any evidence to show that estimate is in any way not accurate. And the RFP proposals that we received in the last month actually served to validate that original estimate. We provided in May the financial report on GEO relating to the stock, the debt, relating to the corporate compensation. All of that information was from SEC reports and public financial records. GEO disputed it in an interview with the Delaware County Times. I welcome their feedback to show anywhere where any of those numbers were not accurate. They have not responded in any way to the numbers that were presented.
I mean, I think from the average person's perspective, probably from this board's perspective, and I only speak for myself, is if you maintain that you're saving over $5 million and you're increasing the services and providing the inmates with more services and better living conditions, obviously, everybody wants to do that. So the question is to make sure, once they have the opportunity to respond, to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, and then we are going to save the taxpayer money, and we are going to be able to missing something that is going to come back and cause something that would be a surprise to county council in regard to expenditures or items that were not considered, that is going to escalate the cost of maintaining the prison, as well as making sure that the county is prepared to go in and provide the services, if they so choose, to the residents of the population of the correctional facility, with making sure they're improving it and not making it worse.
Well said, Your Honor. I couldn't agree more. I think we put a lot of time into these estimates and not just, looked at them in detail, but met with Bucks County, Chester County, Montgomery County. Mr. Lazarus came with us to meet with the leadership of the prisons from the neighboring counties. They want to be meeting with Delaware County folks on a regular basis to share best practices. I think we've identified a number of areas where technology can be implemented that will improve security, that will improve management of the facility. We're anxious to recommend to the county how to move forward in some of those areas. And as you know, being part of the court, there is an opportunity to really integrate the court, the DA, the public defender, the prison operations in many ways that help accelerate and the processes that are involved in justice in Delaware County.
I would echo what Judge
Mr.
Whalen said.
Alsea?
I think Your Honor summed it up perfectly as to what our concerns have been, and I do think that taking the time to put the RFPs out to really vet the assumptions and the feasibility study, well, more than assumptions, the study of what they found from interviewing everybody and doing the work, and I take part in the fact that has been borne out.
Right.
So I think that is good, and I think to the extent that we have an opportunity to make improvements in the living conditions and the treatment and programs available, we don't really have a great ability to do that now. We've seen with trying to work towards some of the treatment programs that Mr. Corson and Mr. Madden were really spearheading. It took a lot of time and effort. If it was under our control, I think we'd be able to kickstart some of those things more quickly.
Yes.
So I think that is to the good. So I appreciate that.
And just to be, clear on the conservative side, CGL has added 5% contingency in that cost. There is $1.7 million budgeted in that estimate for programs. That is substantially more than is being devoted now to programs. We have talked with professionals from Swarthmore College, Drexel University, Villanova, Penn State, and a number of nonprofits, and evaluated a number of programs that are good candidates for the detainees, both for improving mental health, education, job training. Jonathan King is aware of some of those. Bucks County has job fairs at their prison. They bring in corporations that actually are there interviewing people, detainees, before they leave prison, so that when they walk out, they have an opportunity to get a job. Obviously, it's a time when companies can't find enough people to hire. Bucks County is encouraging companies to come and find a way to hire their detainees. And so there's a lot of things in that realm that Delaware County, I think, can do. And if it decides to move in that direction.
I just had a comment about the private part. It's Mr. King. About the private part of the prison. If no one knows, even here or in the public, that over the years it has been so hard to do any kind of business with GO. It's been so hard just from the private perspective itself. And the reason why I bring that up is because if you look at all of the activity of other jails in the surrounding areas of what they're doing, GO has never been in support or participated in any of those things. I know that for a fact, right? From being a former resident there, right? And from being where I'm at now. I'm only saying that to say it's just not about the privatization. It's about having the people that are staying there to have an opportunity to be treated like human beings, to be able to have advocates to come in there and advocate for them or speak for them, and some questions actually get answered. When I did my research for all of the things that I was interested in seeing happening to GO as a reformist myself, right? Everyone told me that they just never had an opportunity to get in there to help. And it has to stop. And I applaud the work that you have done and the research to have it exposed to the community and to the public so they can know clearly what we're dealing with. Regardless of what way we go, at least people know what's going on. And I believe and hope that we have an opportunity to make change for the lives of our residents in Delaware County Prison. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I have a question.
Mr. Alsay, given the fact that we have now completed the RFP process for these elements of the contract, we've got more clarity around what the cost will be. We meaning CGL, has done the more granular analysis on staffing. In your opinion, for the board to make an informed decision on whether or not to terminate the contract, is there anything more that should be done? Or do you think that we are now in a place where this board can make an informed decision?
Mr. Madden, we feel comfortable with, the material that we have provided to the board. We think there's a clear path forward for the county in this case, looked at, from many different perspectives and also compared to the neighboring counties. At this point, we would recommend to the board that it take action when it's ready. We are also ready to answer more questions if there's a need.
Okay, great. And look, I think at this point then I'd ask the rest of the board, what other questions are there? Both for today and I think also given the significance of the decision in front of us, I would suggest that there be some time to absorb what you've learned today, and that, in short order, we come back together to, make a decision. So both today, any other questions that exist, and also between now and a meeting to make this decision, that any questions that remain out there, that they get answered.
Kevin, we have a few more questions from the floor here, so Ms. Love, go ahead.
Thank you.
Great.
Excellent. I feel like I'm, as a board member, I'm missing something. Who has reviewed the documents? Who has reviewed the RFPs within the county or among the board members, as opposed to just relying on your summary and evaluation? Because we're the ones making the decision. We're the ones who are liable. No offense, I've been a consultant, I've been on that side. You finish your engagement, you walk away. So if you could help me, tell me who else has seen it, because when our vice chair asked the question, as the financial person for the county, I assume that she didn't see any of these documents either. So I feel that I couldn't make decisions without seeing the hard documents and references versus the consultant.
That's an excellent question, Ms. Love. The procurement department and law department were involved in issuing the RFPs and receiving all of the proposals. Mr. Lazarus, as county executive, appointed committees of 4 or 5 county employees, with one of CGL being part of a committee where everyone, Mr. Tatum, Warden Tatum, reviewed different people on each proposal, but bringing their expertise to evaluating each proposal and rating each proposal based on certain pre-qualified criteria and giving that back to the procurement office. They have all the details, they have all the pricing. This is something that we are involved with, we are consulted on, but we're not driving. The county's driving this.
And I'm assuming if there were meetings, there were minutes. Is that something members of this board can review?
I think we can pull together for you the summary of who reviewed the different proposals. We can give you the summary of the different input, and we can give you the price ranges from low to high and compare that to CGL's estimates. And I think, when we talked about this several months ago, I committed to provide that to you, so I can do that and
I think that
summarize
would,
for each of them.
at least for me, that would be extremely helpful, not being an employee of the county.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to mirror what everybody else said. What we want at the end, we all agree on. I want to make an informed vote. And like I said, it's your summary. It's not a documented in minutes, but it is. And I would just like to, as a board member, and I hope everybody else feels the same, that they would like to review those minutes.
Sure, we need as much information certainly as we obtain before the vote is cast, whether it's next month or a special meeting.
Understood. Any other questions?
The only other question I would have is, presuming this board were to vote to terminate the GEO contract, what is the practicality of the county stepping in and all of a sudden, in the timeframe of running it, what's GEO's position in regard to the services? How would that transition basically occur? What do you envision that transition? How, when, and the procedure of it?
Well, ideally, it would be a phased transition, and we'd work in partnership with GEO. I've had discussions with some of the senior executives at GEO and asked that I hope that if the county decides to take the prison back, that we can put together a transition plan that is successful for GEO and for the county. We want to, thank GEO for the work they've done. We want to make it as good for all involved. This should not be, locking the door and walking away and the county coming, opening the door. It should be a very planned out transition, because obviously there are human beings inside. They need to be cared for. And we need to do this very carefully.
Yes, sure, I'm sorry. Let's take it. Yes, please. Our solicitor, Ms. Shelley Smith.
Good afternoon. I hate this thing. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to also to note that the contract between the county and GEO at Section 12 actually contemplates what would happen if the county were to decide to terminate the contract, and it requires that GEO participate cooperatively in a transfer of the responsibilities to the county throughout the process and for 60 days after the contract is actually terminated. So termination notice, the contract requires notice of termination of 180 days. Section 12 of the contract specifically requires GEO's cooperation for 60 days after the termination takes effect. So that is in effect 8 months of cooperation from GEO through the process and then afterwards.
Thank you.
If I could add a couple of thoughts. I mentioned when we met last that we are recruiting and hiring an operations manager. That person's role during the transition will be to lead the internal transition team. Some of the other positions we have not started on yet because it's pending the decision of the board and then council to terminate. But we do have the plan to recruit some other key staff that will be up at the at GWH, including in the areas of personnel, contracting, and financial management. Beyond that, we do have working on an agreement with a third-party HR hiring firm to help us hire the corrections officers, which will be the biggest lift. The advantage of going through what we went through in soliciting the agreements for some of these services is it allows us to transition those before we transition the staff. Vice Chair Phillips, among other things, that she's reminded us of, is that transition will be very difficult to do all at once. So by phasing it, we'll be able to get some of those critical activities done while we still have GEO there. CGL has been working on the procedures for us. We've been looking at the transfer of documentation as well. So those things will kick up. The applicants for the warden position will have those before the board probably in mid-October as well. So those things have all been planned out. Really what we're waiting for is the decision to go forward. And once we do, my biggest concern is retaining the corrections staff during the transition. And at our last, remember the last meeting we had, we talked about providing some plans to the council for the board, which we'll do as well, to retain staff throughout the transition. So I think we're prepared to get started. The next couple of weeks will be busy and they will be a little bit hectic, but I think the plan is laid out to where we can have a successful transition, and we will start to recruit and hire the key staff, and some of whom are really needed now as well. So regardless of the decision, we should probably augment the staff that's up there supporting the warden.
Yes.
Just a question, did you say we've hired an operations person?
No, we've posted the position, we have resumes that we've received, and we need to start the process to evaluate and hire.
I just want to make sure we weren't paying a salary to somebody that, in case the vote doesn't go in that direction.
I'm sorry?
I just wanted to be sure that we weren't paying a salary to someone in case the vote does not go in that direction.
No, we have not made the decision to go forward yet, but there are, and Warden Tatum, correct me if I'm wrong, you do have at least one vacant assistant warden position.
Yeah,
and
I was
two.
going to say that.
So we need to hire anyway.
Yeah, whether the board move forward with a decision, there's a need for assistance up there, and it's been a position that's been open, or vacant, let's put it that way. So it would be helpful in any event, so.
Yeah, and to Ms. Love's concern, I think what the approach has been here is to make sure that everything that could possibly be done without committing the county to a decision that hasn't yet been made, that those actions have happened, right? That this board and county council can both kind of look at the situation and say, if they decide to pull the trigger and terminate the contract, that everything is in order to responsibly make that transition.
Yeah, I think that's been a goal to be very careful of not committing this board and not committing council. Which has been, if we did otherwise, some things could have happened faster or something, but it's been very deliberate and to make sure that we've vetted as much as we can. And I think that we've done that. So I just to echo what Councilman Madden says, if there are questions, we should get to Alta and anyone that's in the county government now, and the RFP materials that you're interested in, we should get that. And any other question, we should just make sure we find out what it is and get answers on that.
Any other
Anything?
questions?
Any other discussions? Yeah.
I'm not sure who this question's for, maybe for you,
Yeah.
Vice Chairman. Because I go through, in case anybody's sending us questions,
Yes.
as we do. We all received a letter from GEO
When?
during this meeting,
Oh.
so we know that they're listening. And I guess it's multiple pages, but they highlighted one portion that said, any indication by an outside party of an imminent credit default is completely unfounded and devoid of financial or market analysis.
I
Blah,
would.
blah, blah. So
yeah.
I'm hoping we're not calling for a vote today, because I
No,
think
no.
this definitely needs to be reviewed.
We're not calling for a vote today.
And there was also that they would happily meet with us, which apparently we have not asked them to do.
Well,
So-
they were welcome to come to a public meeting. I actually thought they might come today, to be honest. So
All right.
I don't think we can really, we're meeting in public, we're meeting in person. We're not accepting written comments anymore to be read into the record. So I think we do need to read what they wrote and consider whatever it is they wrote, and perhaps it'll be discussed at another meeting. I don't know, but not at this one.
Frankly, I'm a little uncertain as to what they're getting at, because we're not talking about any credit default today.
Yeah, I mean,
So
but
I'm
we're
not sure where they're
we're-
coming from with
yeah.
that. That's a surprise.
We're not going to take the vote today. I think that the plan will be to be proceeding as, I think there'll be interest to proceed. Want to vote one way or the other soon. And I think that Mr. Madden was talking about either the next meeting or a special meeting to do that. But again, we'll all get a chance to read that, so. Anything else for Mr. Alsea? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the subcommittee reports. So I'm not sure if we, Mr.
Yes,
Corson?
For the MAT expansion and treatment programming at George W. Hill, subcommittee report that I have is Crozier reported they did hire their social worker to begin the Suboxone program within George W. Hill, and that they have a CRS on staff to assist as well. What was reported was they were still waiting on word for the nurse to be hired on Gio's end. So I just kind of wanted to touch base and see if you had any information on that, Warden.
Well, the information I got, we had a meeting last Friday, and, via Zoom.
Warden, could you go to the mic just so people can hear you that are watching?
Yeah, we've been meeting every couple of weeks via Zoom with the Crozier people. And from what I understand at the last meeting, Gio and Crozier are having difficulty finding staff members.
That's what they just recently got, this social worker. So that was what they were seeking.
Well, the social
So they
worker, I
do.
understood they had that person.
And I
but in
know
terms
the
of
other
nurses, yeah.
position, I believe, is a CRS, and they're confident that they can utilize some of the CRSs they have on staff to assist.
So that's all that I had up until that point.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a report for the reentry subcommittee.
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to let, I had already spoke to the warden, and thanks to Majid for the connection. We're going to be trying to work on hosting a job fair inside of George Hill Correctional Facility. I feel like this would be a new and great opportunity for the jail, and the warden he's already aware of it. I'm just waiting for a date, and we're going to try to see how we work the specs out with it. So that's what we're doing in reference to the reentry subcommittee.
Terrific. Good job. Anything else from committees? If not, we'll move to the Warden's Report.
All right. The resident population, 1526. We had 598 commitments in August and 515 releases. We had a 64.5% recidivism rate. In terms of significant incidents, I already talked to you about two other priority targets that were developed at our intel meetings that were arrested based on the probable cause built during those meetings. Again, I'd like to say thank you to Tanner Rouse and his team, Laurie Moore, James Nolan, Lieutenant Billy Gordon, Anthony Ruggieri, Brian Alexander, and the GEO team, which is Dave Byrne, Mario Colucci, Richard Leach, Keith Hayward, Tyrance Moore, Salim Jones, Zach Cerroti, Michael Moore, and the GTL technician, Amanda Herbert. So I left a couple people off last time. I wanted to make sure I got them this time. But they've all done outstanding work, and they are really committed to cleaning up the contraband issues. We had one unfortunate incident. We had a staff member, an officer, who had received serious injuries as a result of a physical altercation with a resident. He went to the hospital for several days, had significant damage to the, I want to say, the right side of his forehead, to include the eye socket. But fortunately, he's recovering at home now, and he has a good prognosis. A visiting update. As of to date, we had 412 video visits in August, and that puts us over 5,000 since the pandemic. 406 in-person visits coordinated in August. Also, on August 16th, we kicked off the video visitation capability for the Public Defender's Office. And so we're waiting for them to tell us how that's working for them. For our behavioral health update, currently we have 6 persons awaiting court order for a placement in the competency restoration program, 2 of which, 6, 2 of which could possibly be diverted to other programs. We have 5 persons on the Norristown State Hospital waiting list and 2 scheduled for transport this week. We had drug and alcohol liaisons discharge 80 residents to inpatient treatment last month. 25 participants in the withdrawal program in August, was pretty good. And 3 graduates. Also, 2 of the participants were females. Now, that's actual participants who were able to take the shot, but there are as many as 8 females doing the programming.
Oh, great.
So, you know, it's going quite well. And I'd have to shout out Jessica Ryan, who's running that program. She's doing an outstanding job. She's very committed. She's a very committed professional. I'd like to talk about mental health for a second because that's come up recently in an article. And there are some things that perhaps people should know about the management of mental health inmates there. First of all, right now, 41% of the residents there are on some sort of psychotropic drug, right? That's significant. There are 20 hours per contract for psychiatry services per week, right? However, much more is needed. And actually, we get like 100 hours between 4 doctors and 3 nurses each week. So it's quite a task. Where they can be diverted, the court does a pretty good job of recognizing who needs competency evaluations and to see whether they need to be restored or not before they go through their judicial process. And so there's a coordination going on between our county liaisons, our mental health liaisons, who do a really good job in coordinating placements at Norristown Hospital or Natel North, or there's a facility, I think, in Chester right now that we're using, and some nursing homes as well. So where they can be diverted, they're being diverted. Actually, when the court recognizes that someone may need to be evaluated, they bring in an independent person who's representing the court to determine if they're capable, and if they're not, they're found to be incompetent, then a referral will be made by the judge, or an order will be produced by the judge for them to go to be restored. And a lot of times that involves going to Norristown Hospital. However, in the interim, until that occurs, the staff at the facility in health services will evaluate that individual and see if they could actually restore them at the facility while they're on that waiting list. Sometimes that works pretty well, and if they think it's worked, they'll have another evaluation so that that person doesn't have to matriculate over to another facility. So it's actually a 2-track process. You have the court evaluator, and then you have the on-premises restoration program. So it's pretty active. We do have a block on Unit 10A, which is for mental health residents. Right? So I just thought I needed to point out some of those things that we're doing. In terms of programming, we have to date 21 GEDs obtained. So that was 3 last month, 190 GED tests administered this year with a 53% pass rate. And as I said before, that doesn't mean that 190 people got their GEDs. That means that they had attempted some part of the GED test and either passed it or not. But they're pretty active there, especially for a jail. For the adult basic education program, which is GED preparation, we had 74 participants last month. We administered 35 GET tests for for them to get the actual test or actually get the diploma. Intermediate unit teachers are going to be coming back for teaching residents under 21 years of age starting this fall. The Flagger training program had 7 participants. Workplace essential skills, which is computer literacy, 24 participants. We had 142 total participants enrolled in either GED or some sort of education program in August. Treatment programs, Prep 1, 72 participants, Prep 2, 21. We had, as you might be aware of, there was a special class taught for an 8-week period. It's called Trauma-Informed Psychoeducational Group for Women. You heard of that before. 17 participants. That program ended after its 8 weeks. We're hoping that the good doctor can come back to us in the fall if the funding permits. It is grant funded. Okay. So, but 110 persons overall participated in treatment programs. The League of Women Voters from Central Delaware County came to visit us during the month, and we had a nice talk with them, and they're going to assist us with our voter registration drive. They're very enthusiastic about that. A maintenance update. We got our trash compactor back today. Thank God for that. And the tray washing machine should be in place hopefully early to mid-October. All of the outstanding AC issues have been resolved just in time for the fall. However, hot water boilers, we got quotes for those. They need to be replaced. And we got 2 quotes in just recently. One's going to be, one of the quotes is $111,000, the other is $104,000. So that'll be on the radar, or I wanted to be on the radar down the road. And that's all I have in terms of my report.
Anybody have any questions for the warden?
Warden, I want to thank you for addressing the mental health needs. You know, we've been talking about substance use disorder, and you know that's a mental health disorder, and it's so important to identify both and the resources that are needed for it. And you know, one of my questions is going to kind of back up to Majid as far as when we talk about those RFPs, as the warden identified, you know, 20 hours a week of psychiatric care is not sufficient. And you know, have we carved out how many hours and what a contract for psychiatric care for 41% of the population at George W. Hill, what that would entitle, you know, what that would be? Because so important as we're identifying this to find out what needs that we have to make sure that these new RFPs include those. And when we're talking about 41% of the population with the quick turnaround at George W. Hill with 20 hours a week, I'm sure there's a large amount of inmates that aren't even getting that psychiatric care before they're discharged to the community. And that's a failure. That's a failure on everyone's part for someone to be discharged, you know, with that, without getting that, that follow-up care. So I just wanted to know, with the RFPs, have we looked at what that would look like, that increase, and is that built in there already?
The RFPs, as for pricing, are very well as a service that we have to the county to budget, what it wants to spend. Obviously, we could spend a lot more than what they spend it on average in every county. That is budget decision.
But in the RFP, like, so what do they just say, how much psychiatric services cost, and then it's the county's prerogative of how much?
It is based on best practice for prison health.
Okay.
CGL calculated certain numbers of hours, certain people being treated per week, per month, per year.
And when we talk about that 41%, do you know by any chance what the difference was compared to the 20 hours that's being provided now?
I don't.
Okay. So if that's something that could be provided, I appreciate it.
Well, just as he stated, I mean, 20 hours was the minimum, but it was a recognition shortly thereafter that there was, you know, it accrued over time. More was needed, and so more was provided. So it may be the same thing in that case, but the baseline is here. At this facility, you're going to need a lot more psychiatric and psychological care.
If I could, imagine the RFPs are really structured to get a like-for-like type comparison, so it was apples to apples. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need to be the scope of work does need to be expanded or changed once they're awarded. And I believe we have the flexibility to do that.
County that it pick the most responsive proposer and then negotiate the contract at once. And the final contract could be different than the actual proposal. That would be up to the county.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you, Ward. We're going to go to public comment. I just want to make one announcement that I should have made at the beginning, but I'm going to follow the lead of Chairman Zidek, who does the same thing. We had an executive session meeting yesterday of the board to discuss personnel matters and potential litigation issues on September 13th. So need to make that announcement. So now it's public comment. If any members of the public would like to make a comment, please come on up and please give your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Jane Dunbar. My address is 232 Garfield Avenue in Norwood, Pennsylvania. And I had a couple questions. First to Mr. Tatum. You said the recidivism rate is over 64%.
64.5.
Could you break that down based on why they're back there? Is it a technical probation that's bringing them back? Is it a lot of them are the detainers that they're coming back on?
I don't have that breakdown.
Okay.
It's just basically a raw number of the new people coming in versus the people who are coming in for the first time.
Yeah.
In this particular case, during the month, we had, of the 598 people came in, 386 of them were new commits, and 212 were returning.
I went through the meeting notes from the beginning of your terms, because you guys asked us to vote for you based on this particular, we're going to bring it back. That's what we want to do. That's our, now we're up to another election now, and we're still not there. And I'm looking at all the minutes from every meeting that you guys have had, and months go by before RFPs are reviewed or they go out in the mail. There was a 5-month gap from the time it was mentioned to the time it was actually mailed for your medical in May of this year. It's 5 months to have it written. And it just seems excessive. And I do give you that leeway that we were fighting COVID, but we're on 2 years now almost. And we're still not where we need to be with this jail. And as a taxpayer, I resent the fact that I'm paying GEO to take my money down to Florida. And a lot of people feel that way. As far as Mr. King goes, I appreciate the work that you do for reentry, because what's happening right now is they're giving bus fare and see you later. That's why your recidivism rate is so high.
I flipped those numbers around. It's 386 that are returning, and the 212 are new commits.
I just want to say I appreciate your concern for the time. I think that we're sensitive to that, but at the same time, this was a totally new creation of a board.
I realize that.
And
I'm giving you guys that
no,
leeway.
and I appreciate it. I know you are. I just want you to know that these are very complex arrangements. They needed to be studied. We're going to need to be on solid footing. So I hear what you're saying. I think we've done, really a lot of work.
Well, we talked about hiring CGL and Alta in December of 2020. And we're still, we're into almost 22. We're December of 21, so that's a year right there. Now, I realize COVID hit, you guys hit the ground running, COVID shut you down. But there were 3 months when deprivatization wasn't even mentioned in the minutes in 2020. Wasn't even mentioned in the minutes that are posted on your webpage. One was April, May, and June of 2020. Not even talked about. It was an ICE contract was the big discussion. Was that actually resolved? Like, we're not taking those anymore, right?
I don't think it's good to go back to 2020. I think we've been under the gun and working as hard as we can. So I hear your comments. I appreciate it. I think there are people that think that. At the same time, we, you hear the people on the board, we have a responsibility to make sure we can do it right, and
And that's
and-
important. I
and-
understand
I know,
that.
and anyone that has talked to me I would say, my view is we got one good shot to do it right if and when the board votes that way. So I think we're really coming close to that. So I just ask for your patience to hang on for a shorter amount of time to get a decision, and I think then you can hold our feet to the fire one way or the other.
So is there a timeline? Are we looking October, November, next year?
Well, I think you just heard today that the board's being asked if they have any further questions to
Right.
get it to us, and I think that we're looking at some kind of action soon. Mr.
So is
Lazarus?
there somebody going to be spearheading those questions so that everybody gets the information they need, or is it, you guys are on your own to find it?
No, I think,
Ms. Dunbar, if I could just respond. First of all, there hasn't been a month that's gone by since December of 2020 where there hasn't been significant action preparing this board to be able to make an informed decision on deprivatization.
I didn't say that.
There
Mr.
may be
Madden. I
months
said it
where
wasn't in the
there was
minutes.
work behind the scenes,
Right, and
but
I
I
know
guarantee you that there hasn't been months where there hasn't been anything moving forward. For example, the last 3 months, the RFP process is taking place. Now that involves a tremendous amount of work in writing the RFP, making sure that there is a responsible amount of time during which those RFPs are out within the marketplace, and we're giving vendors the appropriate amount of time to respond. There isn't a whole lot to tell the public about that, other than the fact that it's ongoing. So similarly, when CGL is doing some of their work, again, until we have the results of their work, there isn't a lot to say. So I really appreciate that you and other members of the public are anxious to see progress, but please understand that when you're talking about an 1,800 person prison, 1,800 people who are within the custody of the county, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're doing this in a responsible manner. Not to mention the fact that, as you mentioned, it's in the midst of the worst pandemic in a century.
I agree.
So I'm not making excuses, but I do want you to understand that there has not been a week that's gone by where there hasn't been significant movement toward this board being able to make an informed decision. We meet on a weekly basis, the deprivatization committee, to make sure that we're moving forward as quickly and responsibly as we can. And to, the question of, what happens next, if it's not already explicit, we've called the question, as the vice chair just said, to the rest of the board, what more do you need to know in order for you to make an informed decision? We will be scheduling a meeting, whether it's our next jail oversight board meeting, or I would encourage it to be before then, that we get together and we have a vote on deprivatization.
No, I never said that I didn't think you were working on it. I just said in the meeting notes on the website, it doesn't mention anything. I wasn't at every meeting, so I don't know if it was. I just went by your meeting notes. And I thought I did say that.
You did, you
Okay.
did.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about, again, I was going on to Mr. King. Is anyone working with Health and Human Services for an aftercare? Is that in your budget? As far as, right now, we're giving them change and sending them out the door. There's no job training, there's no housing advocacy, there's really, they end up on a bus.
We put $1.7 million in the budget.
Okay.
For all types of programs, reentry and others.
So that's all one lump sum.
Like 7 or 8 different things.
Okay.
And that's substantially more.
Because I think that's going to take care of your recidivism. It's going to help a lot. I'm an advocate, so I understand how that is so important. Okay, I advocate for children, but my kids end up in your jail.
Programs that reduce recidivism and help with those.
Good, okay. I think that was all my questions. Oh, no, there was one more question, and I'm not blaming anybody, I can't understand this. Since May, I've been tracking how many ambulances have been sent to George W. Hill. And in May, there were 2 serious injuries where they had to go to the hospital, which is normal. It's going to happen. Then in June, there were 3. One was a suicide attempt, one was an overdose, and one was a cardiac. In July, there was 2, a head injury and somebody who was semi-conscious. Now, they could have come in that way. I don't know the particulars. I just know that they were called. Between August 4th and today, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. there were 11 ambulance calls. That's a big jump. And they were things, some things are explainable, like syncope episodes. You come in if you're on drugs and you're going through rehab. I understand that that can happen. So could cardiac issues. That can happen. Seizures. That can happen. We had incidences of bleeding. We had head injuries. We had fractures. These are all things that don't happen because you're detoxing. These are things that are happening on the second shift or the third shift, starting after, right before midnight, or real close to midnight. And it seems like people would be sleeping when this happens. So I was just wondering if there's an answer to that. Does that go back to the mental state of everyone who works there? Is there a problem?
I would say that the warden does let the board know when there's any medical emergency, so we do get a report on that. I think if we could give the warden an opportunity to look into that and the timing, I think that would give him a
Sure.
chance to be able to answer that. But
Yeah,
I
it just
think
seems
it's
like a
very-
big jump to me. It just,
Yeah.
from 3 to 11 is a lot.
I would need to go back and take a look at the numbers too, but I think we could do that.
Yeah, I mean, just to bring it to your attention, I just thought it
thank
was a
you.
big jump.
Yeah.
And I know what's going on in there. Everybody's scared. Everybody doesn't know what's going on with their jobs. And it's a toxic environment when you have people like that. And it just seems strange to me that it was all after hours, when all of management is not there. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunbar.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Seeing no further public comments, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second, motion to adjourn.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All right, good, Joanne.